to the Bridge the Gap podcast. Here's your host, Dustin Udke.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Bridge the Gap. Great episode tonight. We're going to be talking about weekly matchups, how you decipher them, how you go about finding which matchups are good, which are bad. It's not always a case of what might be on paper, looking at box scores, looking at betting slips and the lines. So to discuss this, I brought in the guy who I think does a great job with this. I brought in the one, the only Colin McTammy from Fantrax. Colin, how's it going tonight?
It's going good. I've done podcasts in the morning. I've done podcasts in the afternoon. I don't think I've ever stayed up this late to do a podcast, but really? I kind of like it.
This is the prime time for podcasts. It's like for me, my son's asleep or should be asleep anyway. So he's not sucking on my bandwidth, even though I'm wired in and I don't have a ton of distractions. But you're a writer at Fantrax. You are doing these bold prediction articles. You're doing some weekly breakdowns. So why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and what you got going on this year?
Yeah, so I don't know if I got the point down here. There it is. That is my Twitter handle. I've jumped over to actually Blue Sky. I believe I have the same name there too. I might just be Colin McTamany, but same profile picture, so you can check me out over there. Yep. I've been pretty busy on Reddit too. I don't know if you've given Reddit a try.
You have been over there. You've been doing AMAs and...
Yeah. So I've actually got an AMA on Reddit coming up, I believe the Thursday before week 14. So the final week of the fantasy football regular season, I will be doing an Ask Me Anything. 6 teams on bye. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions, start, sit, and stuff. But yeah, and then fantraxhq.com. That's where all my work can be found. So check it out there.
Yeah, Reddit's a fun one. I used to dabble in it a bunch, and then it just got too scummy, and I just didn't want to deal with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'll get notifications for comments, and you can tell. I mean, I've got fantasy football newbie, help me with this question. You help them. Yep. You'll have some people ask you a question, you'll give an answer, and then they'll be like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." And you're like, "You know what? I tried."
Yeah, you can't win them all. I mean, it's a great place. They definitely are willing to read your content and interact. It's just you hope it's all positive interactions. It's if you don't have thick skin, Reddit's not the place for you. So
yeah, or the ability to ignore. Yeah.
Yes. And so we're going to talk about matchups because I think you do a great job deciphering matchups every week and kind of going beyond the surface level. We'll get into that, but we start almost every episode of Bridge the Gap with a game.
What exactly is the game?
Well, it is not a quiz or a trivia contest, nor is it a test of brute strength or athleticism. At its core, it's just a children's game, and I would wager that some of you here this evening have played Would You Rather?
So I got a Would You Rather for you, Colin, and this is something because me and you are both also big Survivor fans of the show Survivor, which happens to be tomorrow night, and I know we're both kind of in pools where we talk about that. So I will give you this Would You Rather. Would you rather correctly predict outcome of 3 NFL games this week? So you can pick any 3 games and you'll get the matchups right. Or would you rather be able to pick who is going to go home this week in Survivor?
Oh man, that is a tough one. So that's tough. Survivor's sacred to me. I love sitting down on Wednesdays. I don't always sit down at 8:00 and watch it, but there is something special about having that hour and a half now. They've increased the episode sizes, but that hour and a half of just watching these people battle it out in challenges, the social game, and then man, there's nothing like Tribal Council. 25 or so years later. You don't know what's going to happen there. So I wouldn't give that up, I don't think. I actually think I'd rather predict the 3 games this weekend. And here's why. I want to know the outcome of some of these games so I know who to plug into my fantasy matchups. Yeah. If you can tell me right now that there is a game that is going to end up with a total points of 60 to 70, something crazy, I'd like to know that. So I can plug in players from that game, maybe take my best guess. I'm an Eagles fan, as you can see by some of the Eagles memorabilia here. There's other side. Brandon Graham here. Shout out to you. I know you just tore your triceps. Yeah, I got a signed picture of him there sacking Tom Brady. But so I'm an Eagles fan. If I could know the outcome of that game against the Ravens beforehand to save myself some anguish, or just get excited, even that much more excited, I'd like to know that too. But yeah, I think that'd be my answer. What about you?
I think I'm in the same boat. So I talk Survivor with a couple of friends of mine, and I am in the weeds of Survivor um,
I'm on
discussions.
Survivor Reddit, by the way. Every now and then, I'm
I go
talking
on there every
Survivor.
now and then, and so I consider myself very good at reading people and reading situations. So I made my 3 preseason picks just based on their pictures and names. Teeny's the only one I have left as my 3 potential winners. I had Saul on there, and I had
R.I.P. Saul,
Gabe,
man. That was
Gabe, who just went home this week. So Teeny's the last of my like. Let me just look at their pictures, read their names, where they're from, and see how they're gonna do. But I'm big on the editing. I love a spoiler, to be honest with you. I love
oh
any sort of spoilers because I don't care the outcome. I care more about the story of how you got to that outcome. So
okay.
if you told me Genevieve's going to win this season, I want to see how you weave that story throughout the season. Like when we talk about movies, I don't care about movie spoilers because I want to know how you got there. Like, what's the story you told to get there? Because you can go there many different ways. So, and I also think I'm pretty good at predicting who's going home when. My buddies used to run a pool where you actually had to predict. You had to pick a person every week, and if they went home, you were out. So you had to like pick. It was like the closer you got them to them going home, the better off you did. And I was really good at like, hey, this person's the winner. So like last 2 seasons ago, I was like, I knew Yam Yam was winning like mid-season. I was like,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
just editing, like I'm big into the edit and the story arc they're telling of people. So I think I can predict pretty easily who's going to come and go in Survivor. So I would love to know the outcomes of the games. I'm a Bills fan. We can lock up the division if we win and Miami loses.
Yes. I saw that on it's Adam Schefter starting to put those out there, the scenarios. That's
I
usually this
tweeted
time of
those out
year.
too. Yeah, it's weird that the Bills can lock up the division and the Chiefs can only lock up a playoff spot. Which seems wild to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the NFL for you. You've got
Yeah,
the Seattle Seahawks right now as the 3 seed in the NFC, but
yeah,
the NFC North, in my opinion, has a lot better teams. So
yeah.
it's just how the seeding goes.
Yeah, I was talking to someone like the Lions have like 6 different scenarios where they can clinch a playoff berth if they win and San Fran loses and Seattle loses and Arizona loses and it's all these other convoluted things. But if you could tell me if I knew the outcomes of the Dolphins game, the Bills game, and maybe one other game, I think I would love that for my fantasy teams, but also just for my peace of mind. Like Bills games are just heartbreak. I mean, I'm a Bills fan, so I've been through the heartbreak. My son
I don't think
yesterday,
anyone needs to tell you how the Chiefs Bills are going to go in the playoffs. I mean, it's
I know. My son said to me yesterday, he goes, my son goes, I think I just have a feeling the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl. And I was like, I think he's 11. I was like, oh man, don't say that. Like, don't get your hopes up because it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking when they lose. When they lost to the Chiefs in that like 13 seconds, I just like had to walk. I put a blanket over my head. I had to walk out of the room. My dad was like, why are you so upset? I was like, I
that
just
was
can't talk,
incredible.
buddy. I was like, I just can't talk. Like, to have it just taken away that quickly is just killer. So,
That's funny
but
though.
I think
I
Survivor
don't
is fun.
I don't even like watching movie trailers because I feel like I can watch a movie trailer and be like, oh wait, I just saw something there and spoil it. So I don't know.
Now,
It's
give me the spoilers. Because like for me, it's just about the writing and how you got there, and like the story you tell to get there. Like I don't care the outcome, right? Most movies, the outcome is predictable anyway, right? The good guys win
fair.
for the most part. It's
Survivor's different. Survivor's
Survivor's
different.
very different. Survivor's very different. Which
I don't even
even if
like
you,
on social media when they're like posting clips less than 24 hours later or like a picture
oh
of who
yeah,
went home. Like it forces you to watch. I mean, I want to watch it anyway, but if I have something to do on a Wednesday night, I might not get to it.
yeah. If you don't watch Survivor Wednesday night, you're kind of just you're gonna find it's gonna be spoiled for you. It's gonna be
Hmm.
ruined. A
Hmm.
lot of times they're on the morning shows the next day. They're rap and they're Entertainment Weekly interviews come out the next morning. I follow a couple people on Survivor who just tweet out stuff left and right. So it's just mind blowing. Survivor is totally fun. It's still the best reality show out there. I'm excited for season 50. I've been trying to make predictions of who I think will be in season 50 for me, because that's going to be returners. So I
Now,
have my list.
have you ever been busy during a Bills game and tried to not look at the score and then watch it back as if you didn't know the outcome?
There's a couple times where if they play like Monday night, because I have a group of I hang out with on Monday nights, and we get done around 8, so I miss like the first half. So sometimes I'll tape it and I'll get there, and then I'll just I can catch up pretty quick because I just fast forward through commercials and all that kind of stuff. So I generally don't know the score. And there's only once or twice where I've known the score of the game, but I still watch it and it's still just as fun for me.
Yeah, I'll watch it back, but social media and texting and everything, I there's just too much. I'm gonna know the score before I
Yeah.
turn it on. So
It's hard for me to like stay off Twitter, especially if they're playing on a Sunday afternoon because there's so many other games I want to look at the scores of that it's
yeah,
hard not to see their scores. So
yep.
Let's get into matchup and deciphering matchups. So, what is your process when you're looking at matchups for the week? And you do a bold predictions article every week on Fantrax. You're also doing you do two other articles as well. That kind of revolve around this sense of looking at the matchups and kind of making predictions based on them. What is your process when you're looking at matchups?
Yeah, so I really break things down week by week and quite frankly, day by day. I mean, because this league really does change on a dime. I mean, we had earlier in the year, I remember I traded for AJ Brown very early in the season, and then Friday at practice pulled the hammy. I mean, there's just stuff
Yeah.
that changes so quickly in this league. So I don't think there are any concrete statements that can be made in fantasy football because, just as we thought Nico Collins was really in for this big takeover this season, he goes out with an injury. Tyreek Hill, I was pounding the table to take Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb as top 3 picks this year.
Yeah.
Both of their quarterbacks went down with injuries this year. There's just so much change. So I try to, dial it back, look at things on a day by day basis, week by week basis with these matchups. I do the waiver wire article, and I'll talk about that first. So what I look at with the waiver wire article is the week, the week that just occurred, who got hurt, who played well, obviously, and then look at the week ahead, who's up next.
Yeah.
I know a hot name right now is Jeremy McNichols. If you're thinking about putting a name in for Jeremy McNichols right now on the week 13 waiver wire, he might be the lead back for Washington in week 13, but then he's got a week 14 bye. Odds are in week 13, you have everyone available to you in a year of very, very good running back production. Are you really going to plug Jeremy McNichols into your lineup week 13? Probably not, unless you had Brian Robinson and maybe Austin Eckler. And we're relying on those guys. So you have to look at those things right now, especially, you have a top claim. Do you really want to burn your top claim on a guy like that if you're not going to use him? Because by week 15, Jeremy McNichols might be a nothing, probably will be a nothing. Then I look at risers and fallers, and that's my big article every week because I get to talk about some studs. I get to talk about some guys that maybe are on the rise, some guys that have been good for a couple weeks that are starting to dial it back. It's never the same group of people each week, and it's never the most obvious. I mean, right now, Devon Achane is crushing it. I don't think I need to put Devon Achane on the risers list. We know he's a star. We know he's going to be in your lineup. So I try to talk about players that, hey, I know you're second guessing starting this guy this week, or you're really into it, but you have your reservations. Here's why I think you should or shouldn't. That's the point of risers and fallers. And then lastly are the bold predictions. What I look at there, Derrick Henry rushing for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's business as usual sometimes for Derrick Henry. So that's not really a bold prediction. You're starting Derrick Henry. I try to look at those fringe guys. Like last week, I had Amir Abdullah as my bold prediction running back. That's a guy I think people were debating putting in their lineup. And I said, hey, he's going to be really busy as a receiver in this game. Denver allows a lot of receiving yards and receptions to running backs. That's their matchup. I think it's going to be a pass-heavy approach by the Raiders. And Amir Abdullah is a pass-catching back. Start Amir Abdullah. I mean, sometimes it's that simple. Other times it's, trying to find that diamond in the rough. I'm cautious about suggesting guys like Taysom Hill because there are weeks Taysom Hill is going to be a nothing. And then there's weeks he puts up 42 points. Sometimes that's against me in my home league, but I'm not bitter. You got to look at a lot of different things, but most of the time it's very brief player evaluation and then the road ahead. Right now, we're in a very interesting time. We have 2 weeks left in the fantasy football regular season. Next week, there's 6 teams on bye. That's tricky.
Which is crazy.
And then we're in the playoffs. And right now, if you don't have a playoff spot, we might not even be talking to you in 2 weeks. So I take things on a day-by-day and week-by-week basis.
Yeah, that's how I do it. So I do the wide receivers, streamers, and sleepers, and then tight end streamers and sleepers at Fantrax every week. And my process for tight ends and wide receivers is slightly different. Tight ends, I'm looking at points against, how much the team has given up to tight ends. Wide receivers, I'm really looking at cornerback matchups because a team might be giving up a ton of points to wide receivers, but it's never their top wide receivers. Always like the second or third guy because they might have one good corner. So last week I started on Sunday night. I kind of put guys in and I was like, I think I was like, maybe a Chargers receiver will do well against Baltimore. And I was like, well, it's probably everyone's going to start Lad McConkey. People are probably going to ride with QJ. And I was like, well, let me see what Josh Palmer is. And I looked at him and I just realized like, oh, the cornerback matchups are tough. Like he's going to get shut down. Like, and he kind of did. So it's always those guys where it's like, hey, who's kind of trending the right way? So that's how I do it. I look at who's trending the right way in terms of snaps and usage. For running backs and quarterbacks as well, is like, are they, quarterbacks obviously play snaps, but are they throwing a ton? Or are they not? And I can use that for wide receivers and tight ends. Like, I don't want to, if I'm going to go take a gamble on a guy, I want a guy that's going to be on a team that's passing a ton. I don't want a team that's passing 20 times a game. I want a guy that's going to be passing 40 times a game. There's just a higher opportunity for volume. Look at cornerback matchups, kind of look at the scheme. I think everyone was very much in on Mike Gesicki for a while in that game. I was like, the one game I was like, he's just, I guess it was Baltimore. And I was like, he's just not going to do well. Like Baltimore's stingy. They were just stingy against tight ends. And everybody's like, oh, Mike Gesicki. And I was like, no, it's just not going to be the case. And then end up being other tight ends. So I do think you have to look beyond just this blanket of this guy's been really good, this guy's hot, let me start him. Because I do think correlation and causation, I'm almost to the point where they don't exist in fantasy football for me.
Yeah.
Just because Derrick Henry has scored a touchdown in 10 straight games doesn't mean he's going to score in the 11th game. Because for the same reason, just because the ball has landed on red 10 times in roulette doesn't mean it's going to land on red the 11th time. Every spin, because every time it's a different team, different scenario, different game script, different game flow, different momentum. It's all different. So that causation and correlation for me don't really exist. And so that's where it has to be weekly. You have to look at things. So I do look at betting odds a little bit and see what the line is, because I think game script does matter, especially for passing teams or running backs, right? If you're in a game script where you're playing theoretically Carolina, who doesn't score a ton of points up until this week all of a sudden, or you're playing the Giants, you're probably going to run the ball more because running is the luxury of the winning team. So if you're telling me a team's going to only throw it 5 times in the fourth quarter, well, I want the running back from that team. So that's kind of how I look at it. Where does how does that lead you to make these bold predictions? Go ahead.
I want to add on to that real quick. I think another factor that we forget about, and I think is really important for this week, is the Thursday night football games. And nobody loves a Thursday night football game, but we've actually been pretty blessed this year with production on Thursday night football. This week, obviously, we have 3 games on Thursday, 1 on Friday. And I haven't looked too much into it this year because running back has been so good. But there was a trend, I believe last year, maybe even the year before, or both, that teams that played on Sunday and then played on Thursday would often dial back their running back play on Sunday in preparation for Thursday. One thing that kind of bucked the trend this year was Chase Brown. He was really, really busy a couple weeks ago on Sunday, and then they came out on Thursday night football, and he was the only running back to touch the ball. So I do look at that kind of stuff too. Like you said, game script, where the game's being played, how they fared in their last game, snap percentages and stuff like that. But I think it's also important too to factor in the day of the week they play on. Right now you have the Baltimore Ravens just were in a really, really kind of a battle with the Chargers early on last night, but Derrick Henry was super busy. Now on a short week, he gets to go home, but he's going up against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. Obviously, I'm going to talk about them that have been pretty good against running backs this year. So I think, Derrick Henry is going to be, Derrick Henry, and you're going to play him. But, maybe in those deeper leagues, Justice Hill becomes more of a factor. We saw what he can do. I played 40% of the snaps last night. So have to look at those kind of things too. Short rest, long rest, etc.
Right, you see that a lot, especially like when you see like teams play like 3 games in 10, 15 days or whatever, like they're playing that stretch. You're right. That is that attrition wears off. I love high-end skill players coming off by, so like a Drake London or a Kyle Pitts this week, because that team gets a whole extra week to not only just rest and be healthy, but also prepare for their team they're coming with. So I get 2 weeks to prepare for them. They only get a week to prepare for me, and I get time to implement some new plays. I don't love it for the lower end guys because they're not going to make up plays for, Ray McLeod or Tyler Algier. But when you talk top end guys, you kind of see that come through. We got a question here in the chat since we're talking weekly matchups. JSN, Terry McLaurin, Bucky Irvin, DJ Moore, Tyrone Tracy needs 1 for a flex and 2 wide receivers from Jason Quinn. Jason, thanks for the question. What are you doing here, Colin?
Who do the Buccaneers have this week? I'm trying to think. I feel like their schedule is really good, but the name that sticks out of that list right away is Bucky Irving.
Yeah.
He has been, in my opinion, he looks like a top 10 back in the league right now. I know
Sure
Rashad White
does.
mixes in there, but man,
They're playing at Carolina.
I mean, not much more needs to be said, in my opinion. Carolina just allows so many points and so many rushing yards against the running backs, and that's a divisional game. The Buccaneers are still pushing for the playoffs. So right away, I know there's 2 wide receivers that need to be started, but when you look at the flex, I tend to start wide receivers in the flex in PPR. This is half PPR. Bucky does catch passes, but he's just running so well, and he has such a good matchup. Right away, I think I would plug him into the flex. So then you look at the wide receivers. Well, Tyrone Tracy's there too. I want to talk about him. He's fumbled. He's had some really bad fumbles lately. I do worry that on Thursday, if he fumbles, you're not going to bet on something like that. But if he does fumble, he is going to get banished, to the bench.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
That scares me a little bit. So I would go Bucky over Tyrone. I don't think I'd even consider anyone on the Giants right now, just with the way that offense looked. So then you look at these 3 wide receivers, you need 2 of them. I look at quarterbacks first and foremost. Who's got the best quarterbacks? Right now, you've got Caleb Williams, who's got a new offensive coordinator. He looks pretty good. You got Jaden Daniels, another rookie, but he's looked healthier this past week. And then you got Geno Smith. Who are the Seahawks playing? They've got a tough matchup, don't they?
The Jets.
Yeah, the Jets. I mean, they've got to go to New York. I like to look at home and away as well. I think just right off the bat, the game plan for the Bears is to get the ball to DJ Moore early and often. So he does stand out to me a little bit in this one. But Terry McLaurin, I mean, he's just a big play waiting to happen with Jaden Daniels. I know the offense isn't too creative with mixing in Terry McLaurin. He kind of lines up in the same spot every time, but then you have JSN. This is a tough question. JSN has just been on a tear lately. I tweeted about him earlier this week.
Yeah.
And, I know we're going to talk about momentum here in a second and what that means. But I think just looking at this, I think I'd go with JSN and Terry. And that's a tough sit for DJ Moore. But there are a lot of mouths to feed there. And you just don't know what kind of Caleb Williams and offensive line play you're going to get there any given week in Chicago.
That's how I went. I agree with you. I think Bucky Irving, and I'm happy because I said on a podcast before the season that you would not be able to trade Rashad White and get Bucky Irving by midseason, and that has held true. And this is why I didn't want Bucky Irving. I was in one of my dynasty leagues. Someone was trying to trade me Rashad White, and I was like, no, because they're going to draft a guy, and Rashad White's going to lose his role.
Yeah.
So I think Bucky Irvin's one of your flex, or is the flex. I agree with you. JSN. I get it's the Jets. There's some, Sauce Gardner is still good, but is he as good as he was? Is it a system? I think he's just hot. Then we're looking at DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin. I think the quarterbacks are equal. I think Jaden Daniels is slightly a better quarterback in terms of like reads and being able to create plays. I like what I've seen from Caleb Williams coming on lately, but is it going to be a DJ Moore week? Is it a Keenan Allen week? Is it a Roma Dunze week? You don't know. Or is it a Terry McLaurin week or Zach Ertz? Like, there is not many other mouths to feed for the Washington offense. Terry McLaurin has been underwhelming, very much like him and Michael Pittman have been kind of blah this year. But I like what I've seen recently from Terry McLaurin, so I'm going JSN, McLaurin, and Bucky Irving.
I will say about DJ Moore, though, he does play Thursday, so you do need to make that decision.
Yep, make that decision.
Obviously, sooner than later.
And it's the first game on Thursday.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to play a Bear in Detroit on Thanksgiving. That just comes across as a bad idea. But game script. I think the Bears are going to have to throw a ton. And, Detroit's run defense is really, really good. They're down Alex Anzalone, the linebacker. So there's some issues there on the defense there for Detroit. So it could be a pretty competitive game. But even if it's not, the Bears more likely than not are going to be throwing a ton. So I do understand the high volume approach with DJ Moore. That's a little bit of a coin flip, I'd say, between Terry and DJ Moore.
I agree, and I don't think it's going to make a huge difference unless Terry McLaurin comes out and has a stinker. I love the Lions defense. I'm a huge fan of Brian Branch. I loved him at the combine, loved him at the draft. I got to talk to him a ton at a private event at the draft, and he's just so smart and soft-spoken. Him and Christian Gonzalez were just two of the smarter people I've ever met in life. Like, they just understood like life and football in a different way. Like, they got it. Like, you just tell when they talked about it, they understood their role and like what it means to be a teammate and what it means to like go out there and produce. So I think Brian Branch is going to have a great game. I think he's going to confuse Caleb. I think that defense is really just going to come out and really, because it is the prime time, not prime time, it's 11:30 on Thanksgiving, but it is that standalone game. I think the Lions want to make a statement, and I think that's going to suck for the Bears that the Lions are going to want to make a statement.
Lions also are really still going to be battling for that number 1 seed. The Vikings, Packers, and Eagles are all on their tail.
Yep.
And there's a lot of NFC North skin in the game there. So they need to win those divisional games, and this is really the obviously the next one up for them.
Yeah, because it could cost them the difference between having a home playoff game and being a wild card.
Yep.
Because I think we're going to see all three of those teams, the Lions, Packers, and Vikings, make the playoffs.
I agree.
And so I think it'll be Eagles and Commanders, and one of those Commanders will be the other wild card team. I think the South has a second team, nor does the West. So that's definitely going to be. And I think the Lions would love to have a home playoff game, if not more. If they can get the 1 seed and have it run through Detroit, they'd be loving that.
There is the element though of wanting to watch a player on Thanksgiving, and I do get that. You don't want to sit there and. I mean, I don't love any of the games this year on Thanksgiving. That one's probably the best one, but kicking your feet up and watching some of your guys go is always fun.
Yeah, there's always that fun. I mean, but I think you can find other ways of get a DFS lineup.
Yeah,
join one of these new apps, join a locker or something like that. Yeah, you can find other ways of making it fun. I think that Giants Dallas game is when everyone should be eating from 3 to 6. On Thanksgiving and skip that game, and then Miami Green Bay at night should be fun. That's at 7:20. So. It's not a horrible slate. It could be better. It was supposed to be good.
Be cold there, yeah.
It is. So let's talk about that. So when you're looking at matchups, how does weather play?
Supposed to be good, exactly.
How does weather play into your factors matchup? Are you factoring that in a ton? Where do you fall on weather playing an impact in how games play out?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple years ago. This was back when Trey Lance was the starting quarterback for the 49ers.
So 4
games.
I
believe. I'm sorry?
Somewhere in that 4-game span?
Yeah, right. And his first game of the season was in rainy Chicago against Justin Fields. I mean, how much has changed since then, obviously. But that was a factor for me. I think that was week 1. And, it is downpouring in Chicago. So you've got a guy like Trey Lance who has barely thrown the ball in his college and professional career, obviously. Now going to Soldier Field in Chicago in a downpour. That's a downgrade to the entire receiving team. But, there's players that you just can't stomach sitting. Those are the Tyreek Hills, of years past. Even in that offense, like Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, like you're not going to sit those guys. So this time of year, though, is important. I don't know how much snow we're going to see across the league. Obviously, we had our first snow game the other day. That was a big talking point because it was Thursday Night Football. That was so much fun, but rightfully so. I mean, I don't have a ton of Steelers and Browns across across my fantasy teams anyway. But, I got a lot of questions on Reddit and on Twitter and Blue Sky about, Tillman and Judy. And obviously it worked out for Judy. Tillman exited with a concussion, but it was really the running backs that I wanted in that game, if anyone at all. More than anything, I perk up when I hear about snow or bad weather with the defenses. Odds are there's going to be interceptions and fumbles. And with those defenses, you want those points that they can't take away from you. Obviously, you lose points when the offense scores on you, but you get those sacks, those interceptions, those fumbles, those points are cemented into your score. So that's how it, if anything, it's a tiebreaker. I've got a guy playing in sunny Miami, and then I've got a guy playing in rainy Kansas City, depending on the teams. I mean, that might just be the tiebreaker for me.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. It's not a huge factor unless it's like, we talk about Buffalo and there's supposed to be lake effect snow for that Bills 49ers game, but it's not supposed to be snowing during the game. It's just going to be so like to and from, there'll be snow around. I don't think it's going to be like actively snowing like we saw in Cleveland, but even the Cleveland game, there was still plenty of passing. What I like about snow and rainy games is what you generally see is, so in that Cleveland game, what we didn't see from Russell Wilson was those moon balls, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you get up there, when you throw the ball up, that's where the wind is. It's swirling up, higher up you go, and he didn't see this. A lot of dink and dunk passes. But I also think it affects, what I like about it is it does open up opportunities for bigger plays, for more game breaking. So I like guys with speed and who have elusiveness, because one cut, if some guy slides or falls, he's gone. Like you're talking about these one, like he's running the route and all of a sudden he makes a cut and the defender slips because it's slippery and wet. He's wide open and he's gone for 60 yards and a touchdown. So I like that. I don't think it necessarily cuts down on passing. It might cut down on certain times of passing, like Russell Wilson didn't have a greatest game because he couldn't throw those moon balls to Pickens. So I think that's where you have to look at it in a case by case situation. I don't like Russell Wilson in rainy, windy games, but I might like a dink and dunker, who like a Kirk Cousins who's not going to throw out these like giant passes, who's going to throw it to guys who can make plays after the catch. Those yak guys are going to be huge in weather games. Sunny games are sunny games, right? They're fine. I don't like kickers in windy games, obviously, because again, you're talking about kicking a ball where it's just who knows what's going to happen. Every stadium is different. So when you talk about Kansas City has one windy ends, because it's kind of open on one end. Same thing with Buffalo. New England's the same way. They have a one kind of open end where it's just kind of extra windy. So knowing that can matter. There's a great guy, and I can't remember who it is on Twitter that puts out a weather report every Sunday, which I think is a great thing. I agree with you. It is a tiebreaker for me when I'm looking at matchups. If I have someone playing in a dome, obviously I'm going to take the dome guy over someone who's playing in Buffalo where it could be windy and cold. So that's great. It is a tiebreaker. But let's talk about momentum because I think that's a part of that we don't always look at. We look at guys right now like with Nick Westbrook-Akine, who scored in 6 of 7 games. Is momentum real? Because I think that's a question that people have. And does it play into how someone is doing? Does that, both good and bad, is if they're on a hot streak, does that continue? Or if they're on a cold streak, does that kind of put you off or turn you on to a guy based on their momentum?
So Jalen Hurts said after Sunday Night Football in Week 12, momentum is the fakest thing out there because it can end and begin at any moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely true. I mean, I think if you're starting Nick Westbrook-Akine, expecting him to score a touchdown again, you're going to get caught with your pants down, for lack of a better term there. A guy like Noah Gray right now, he has back-to-back games with 2 touchdowns. Well, 2 touchdowns each, based on limited volume right now. Those 4 touchdowns in his last 2 games account for 58% of his fantasy points over those last 2 weeks on just a 13% target share. Well, if he's not scoring those touchdowns, Noah Gray is a bad start. So expecting that kind of momentum can kind of be fool's gold. But, there's some guys like JSN right now. We just talked about him. He is on an absolute tear. I think his numbers, it might be momentum, but it's also based in, factual numbers, volume, playing time, first reads from Geno Smith. So you do have to look at that kind of stuff. Running backs too. I mean, running backs, if you're running well, you can see it. But then you run into a defense like Baltimore, who's been really good against the runs this year. That's a brick wall. So, we'll see. I know I keep talking about the Eagles here, but Saquon Barkley obviously is dominating this year. He's about to go up against the Ravens. Derrick Henry's about to go up against the Eagles. Momentum will be very interesting against those 2 teams this week. But again, you're playing all those guys in those games. So I think your question's more for the guys like the Noah Grays, the Nick Westbrook-Akine. You got to be careful with those kind of stats. Like, oh yeah, he scored a touchdown in 3 of the last 4 weeks. That's cool. When did those touchdowns happen? In junk time at the end of the fourth quarter? Was the backup quarterback in and threw a, moon ball to Marquez Valdez-Scantling? Like, I don't really know. That's another guy too. I mean, limited volume, but making plays right now. Be careful with those kind of guys. So I think momentum is kind of a mental game, especially as a fantasy football manager. You can convince yourselves of momentum and, this is a good start because the vibes are high, but you got to dig a little deeper sometimes.
I agree with you, and I wrote about Noah Gray in my tight ends, sleepers and streamers and sleepers. And I put him a sleeper, and I liked some of the underlying metrics for him. Again, I don't think I expect him to score 2 touchdowns, but he's, his snap share has jumped up. He's had 76 last week, 59% this week. He saw 5 targets and 4 targets, so I like that. It's better than his 1 or 2. So there is some reason to believe that he could be better than his norm, but not the 2 touchdowns better. Like, I don't think that's going to continue. Like, if he's scoring you 3 points every week, he might get you to 6, right? I don't think he's going to have another 10, 15 point, 22 point week. I do think you're right. I think there's some things when you look at momentum, especially like running backs are a different breed because when you're running so well and you almost feel invincible that you do crazy things like hurdling a guy backwards like Saquon Barkley. Like when you put up 233 yards or whatever it was, you're just going to come out and go, yeah, I can do it. Like, I know I can. I also think there's negative momentum. So when you look at a guy like Quentin Johnson, who just keeps dropping the ball.
His first drop, I wholeheartedly believe his first drop led to his second drop, led to his third drop.
It's
It
just
just
he gets in his own head, and he's been in his head, and he hears it. There's no way he doesn't hear. He didn't hear it last year that he has
they were booing
hands
him.
like a snake. Like he's got stone hands, and it's getting to his head. And golfers get the yips. I think we see it with kickers. They get the yips, and they just kind of like start
Justin
shaking
Tucker.
everything. Yeah, they start overcorrecting, and they can't get out of their own head. They can't get out of their own way. Football is to me an instinctual game. Like you should go out there and just run your routes and play with instincts. It's when you try to like overthink things, you start making those mental mistakes because you're just trying to think too much. Now, great players can do crazy things. I think that's why you see Mahomes. He has so much confidence that he's like, yeah, I can throw it, as I'm going to the ground underhand and do this crazy thing because he just has that confidence because he's done it. Like he has that momentum. He knows the things. He knows that if it goes bad, he'll just fix it the next job. I think there's a guy like Quentin Johnson, someone who I'm weary for the rest of the season because I'm not sure he can get out of his own head the rest of the way. And when you start having those mistakes and you start dropping passes, then people lose faith in you, and that doesn't help you at all. So when you start losing targets and snaps, then you're like, okay, now it starts compiling, and that negative momentum snowball really goes downhill really fast. So that's what's crazy about it is you're right. I don't know if it's definitely real, but I definitely it can start and stop like that. And what causes it, what doesn't, you never know because then Johnson can come out and they can go first play of the game and throw an 80-yard bomb to him, and he's all of a sudden back into momentum, and he's like, I got it. I know what I'm doing now. And I fixed it. Quarterbacks, they can throw, 2 interceptions in a row, and then they fix it. They just kind of, they figure it out. It is hard. And I think a lot of times fantasy players want to chase points because they want to chase them when they want the vibes. They want to go, yeah, I did it. We did it. Like, this was so cool. I scooped the next Nick Westbrook-Akine, and he scored a touchdown. It's like, cool, but is that really going to get you placed? Like, at some point, you're going to get burned. I always say this. There's a reason why guys are backups. There's a reason why Sam Darnold was a backup for all those years. At some point, he's going to turn into a pumpkin. So I'm going to ride it until it dies, but just know at some point it's going to die.
Tommy DeVito last year.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Look at him now.
Yeah.
I know, to bring this a little bit full circle, weather, momentum, etc. My biggest one is last year, Dak Prescott. I play in a home league, auction league, and I kind of ignore quarterback there. I'm not willing to pay for the top guys, and I probably should. But I get lucky this year. I got Kyler Murray pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Last year, I had Dak Prescott, and I got him off the scrap heap, and 21.4 points per game, weeks 1 through 14. He was a stud. I made the playoffs as a 3 seed, which means I had to play round 1. 7.1 points in the first round, QB 32. Quite literally the worst quarterback in the league in fantasy football opening round of playoffs. Cold day in Buffalo. You bench Dak Prescott and he goes off. Your league's going to call you an idiot. So you have to start him. But then, he runs into a wall, bad weather, and the momentum just stops. And it's enough to make you sick, really. So you have to accept it when it stops. But I do understand wanting to ride the wave.
Yeah, there's always that. And so I tweet out every Wednesday. I tweet out my narrative street, which has birthday games, revenge games, and homecoming games. And someone asked me, like, does this factor in? I'm like, I honestly don't know. Like, I don't know, but people want to know these things.
J.K. Dobbins looked pretty good against the Ravens until he got hurt last night. So.
Yeah, it's just one of the things where, like, there's just some guys do and some guys don't. And it's just, again, causation and correlation for me don't exist in fantasy football. So it's like, I don't know if it does, but people want to know those things, right? That's why I started including the homecoming games, because you see guys and like, oh, he grew up an hour from here, and he's got 40 family members. He's like, well, of course he's going to play a little extra for all of his family. Like,
I think coaches know that too. Like David Montgomery, he's banged up, but I think he's going to play Thursday, and they're playing the Chicago Bears, the team that drafted him. They're 3 yards out. While they've been giving it to Jahmyr Gibbs in the red zone and goal to go situations, maybe that time they emphasize, 2-3 plays to just try to get David Montgomery into the end zone. So I do think it's worth considering, but I wouldn't rest my whole week
No.
on it.
I don't rest my well, I just put it there. That's why I call it Narrative Street because it has no,
Yeah.
like, factual basis. It's out there, right? And I think there's as we get later in the season, especially the last 2 weeks, we start talking about contract incentives, and some coaches are really cool about getting the guys to those certain benchmarks so they get that extra incentive.
Yep.
I would love to be able to come up with, like, having a baby, thing because that's just it seems like if they have
Dad
a baby,
strength.
they go off.
Yeah.
Or like, someone like their dad dies, like Brett Favre, you just have these monster games, like those do play into it. It's just you don't always know when those things are happening. So I try to put it out there just because people enjoy it. It's a fun thing. But that leads me to: is there ever a time where you just have a gut feeling, and maybe the analysis says differently, but you just have this gut feeling? How do you balance that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at your matchup, right? If you're an okay team fighting for a playoff spot and you're in a must-win situation against the number 1 seed juggernaut team,
Yeah,
and you're choosing between a flex, you're going to stare at those 2 or 3 players all week.
yeah,
And I do think eventually first you're going to dive into the analytics, because that's how you've narrowed it down to 2, 3 guys in the first place. But your gut is going to kick in at some point. This past week, I actually had a gut call. I had Josh Downs or Ladd McConkey, and something in my gut told me that Ladd McConkey might not play Monday with that shoulder injury. I know he practiced on a limited basis, but I looked at the 2 matchups. Josh Downs had a really good matchup. Unfortunately, I don't know if you watched that game, but he had 3 pitches for 58 yards called back due to penalty. Unlucky there, but I had him and Ladd McConkey balanced there, and my gut was telling me you're going to kick yourself if Ladd doesn't play and Josh Downs goes off. So, I look at Josh Downs, got a good matchup, so I plugged Josh Downs in. It didn't burn me in the long run. Ladd did have a good game, not so much better than Josh Downs, but it definitely plays a role eventually. When the gut call goes right, you want to puff your chest out. I called it. When it goes bad, maybe you were just hungry when you had that gut feeling. I don't know.
yeah. And it's funny because I think that's very much the dynasty mindset. I think for a lot of players who play dynasty is that you are taking a gut check on their future, right? Like, is this guy going to be good? So when you're drafting or you're making trades, I just made a trade for Will Disley, and the analytics said, hey, he's been really good, and the matchups look really good. Do I think he has a future? Probably not, but you never know. But I've been platooning Colby Parkinson and Barner and a couple other scrub guys, and a lot of it's just been matchup is equal. Let me just go with this guy, and it seemed to work out. But I think dynasty for a lot of us is, especially with rookie drafts, you get to that second, third, fourth round, it's just gut check. Like, do you believe in this guy's talent, and do you believe in the situation and your process to get there? And that's really what it is. And you're right. When it does work, you definitely want to, puff out your chest and brag about it, do your, victory lap on Twitter or Blue Sky. When it doesn't work, you just kind of go, I gave it a shot, right? And you just kind of have to live with it. And I think you said something interesting because something I always go back to is I always tell people, like, which guy are you going to be happy? Which guy are you going to be less upset with that you benched and he goes off?
100%. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we just go, well, this guy, and it's like, yeah, but if you bench that guy and he goes off, are you going to be kicking yourself versus the other guy? And I think a lot of people go, oh yeah, if I bench this guy and he goes off, I'm going to be so mad at myself. It's like, cool, well then play that guy. Because best case scenario, he goes off in your lineup. Worst case scenario, he goes off your lineup, and you're upset.
What will you be more upset about? You got to weigh that scale constantly. I think the last thing I want to say on that, and you mentioned it before, is your gut told you that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were going to draft someone to compete with Rachaad White. When it was, but I had the same feeling. I have Rachaad White in my main dynasty league as my RB2 behind CMC, which was really good for me last year.
Yeah.
This year, not so much, obviously, but they draft Bucky Irving, and I kind of take a step back and go, well, wait, I knew they were going to draft someone, but Bucky Irving, not really the guy I thought they were going to add to that backfield. No. All right, fine. He'll maybe catch a couple passes and steal some receiving work from Rachaad White. Wrong. I mean, he has been running so much better than Rachaad White. So I do think you need to look at that. I mean, another one, the Chargers. My gut told me they were going to draft a running back. It took them until day 3 to grab Kamani Vidal. So then all of a sudden, my gut feeling of like, oh, I love whoever they're going to draft. I take a step back and go, wait a second. They waited that long to draft who from Troy? Yeah. And you start to look into the player a little bit. You convince yourself, but he's done nothing this year. So
absolutely nothing.
Yeah, you kind of just have to shrug it off. It really just depends on how much you're willing to invest in your gut calls.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? And I think there's part of it is when your gut call is wrong, like admitting you're wrong and figure out why it was wrong. Like,
Why?
and I think
Yep.
you can check your gut with like some post analysis of like, okay, I believe this because of whatever it is. So, I was 2 years ago, I was a firm believer that whatever tight end went to Detroit was going to be the best. And I was really hoping they'd sign Gesicki in free agency. He signs with New England. And coming out of the combine, headed into the draft, we were all talking Michael Mayer, Sam Laporta, Tucker
Mhm.
Kraft, and there's one other guy. And Sam Laporta goes to Detroit, and I said, he's the guy I want because that
Yeah.
system and that like my gut was telling me like that's gonna be the guy because of the system. And that's what my process told me and my gut. And then even this year, I get to go to the combine and draft every year, which is super nice, and hopefully you get to continue that. I got to meet Drake May at the draft and interact with him and watch him interact with the people. And I was like, dude, this guy's a leader, straight up. Like
Yeah.
and I was like, and that just was something that just said to my gut, like, hey, he's the dude. Like he is the dude. Like wherever he goes, he's gonna be good no matter what, because he's just that dude. And there's guys who I've gotten bad gut checks on, like bad intuition, whatever you want to call it on, and it hasn't gone right, or it's been hit or miss. And I have to go back and okay, if this is why did I feel this way about this guy? Okay, this is what was pointing me towards that. And it's part of it's intuition, part of it's gut, but I think you have to go back and look at those things and go, okay, what was I thinking and was I right? My Rashad White thing was his yards per carry was just so bad.
Yeah, he was
And
a
you're just like,
plotter.
man, they're
Yeah.
not. Yeah, he's just a plotter. He's getting like 2 yards a carry. And right, and there's other things that play into that. Coaches changing and all that kind of stuff really does play into it. So it's just interesting to see how gut plays, especially when you're talking a weekly matchup of you know things you can't quantitate on analysis. Bills Chiefs is just a big game, so Josh Allen might just play a little extra because it's a big game. That's just not
Yeah.
something you can. There's no analytic for it. There's no, we talk about Kirk Cousins in the primetime games. Like, is that real? I don't know, but he just doesn't play well. And I think this year with Jared Goff being the dome team and he goes and plays outside, he knew it. And I think that was part of that gut was like, hey, he wants to prove them wrong. He wants
Oh
to prove
yeah.
everybody wrong that they're not just, and he had a great game outdoors in Green Bay. So I think that's part of it is like everything may say, and again, correlation causation for me isn't a thing in fantasy. But Jared Goff knew the conversation. He hears those things, and I think he took it as motivation. Whereas I think we talk about momentum and gut, like some other guys just crumble under that pressure. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, any player that says they don't listen to the noise is lying. Aaron
They
Rodgers
all listen to
knew
this.
that people were bashing the Jets all year long.
Yep.
That's why he goes on
Yeah.
Pat McAfee every week and laments about it.
And that's why Aaron Rodgers is going to stick around for another year because he doesn't want to go out in the low. He thinks he
Yeah.
can prove everybody wrong, so he's going to stick around longer than he probably should.
Yeah.
I've said for the longest time, I think he should have retired when Brady retired, but he didn't want to share the limelight of the Hall of Fame with Tom Brady.
Yeah. Well, Brady also was on a warpath the year he won the Super Bowl. He beat Breeze, he beat he beat Rodgers, and then he beat Mahomes. And I think that was really tough for Drew Brees kind of rode off into the sunset. Aaron Rodgers probably should have too, but you think you can still compete at a high level and keep up with a guy like Brady, and you get humbled a little bit.
Yep. Well, that's been our talking about weekly matchups, how you decipher them, kind of Alan, your process, my process, how we look at weekly matchups. Before we get out of here, we got one last thing, and I call this segment "Hit Me with Your Best Shot."
Hit me with your best shot. Fire away.
And so, Colin, what I want you to do is give me 3 bold predictions for this offseason. I'm going to tell you which one I like best.
Okay. I wrote a couple down, and I wanted to give you 3 different, flavors here: mild, medium, and spicy.
Okay.
So I don't really know how to give you the statement on this, but I just think the bold statement for Dallas this offseason is they're just going to be a complete overhaul. And I want to dive into that a little bit. This is a team that talked up Jonathan Brooks before he was off the board and missed out on Jonathan Brooks. They said they were all in. They traded a 4th-round pick for Trey Lance last year. He hasn't played. They traded a 4th-round pick for Jonathan Mingo this year. What are they doing? I think the bold prediction for me on this one, and it might not be that bold, is that Jerry Jones takes a huge step back. He's 82 years old. I mean, it's time to, he'll still be there. He'll still be in the war room, but I don't think he can legitimately be making decisions anymore. You have Dak Prescott's cap hit next year is going to be $90 million. CeeDee Lamb's cap hit's going to be $35 million. And as of now, Micah Parsons is going to be $20 million. That's three guys that are going to account for half your cap. My bold prediction for this is that I don't think Micah Parsons is going to be on the Dallas Cowboys next year. And I think if, you look at the trade a couple years ago, Khalil Mack, he's bounced around the league. Chicago went and got Khalil Mack from the Raiders. I don't think Dallas is in a position to compete legitimately just yet. I think they could use, they have their first, second, and third round picks. Are all three of those guys going to be contributors next year? If they draft Ashton Genty, first round running back, I won't take that seriously. That'll be great for fantasy, but they need to build up that line and they need to get right. And I think trading away Micah Parsons and getting more capital might be the way to do it. I mean, it'll help you out with the cap too. So that's the first one. You want me to just keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
All right. The second one has to do with T. Higgins. This is probably more the mild one. The Micah Parsons one was the medium. T. Higgins, I think obviously we can all expect him to leave Cincinnati. Yeah. Maybe he'll go back, but I think financially and where the team's at, they've obviously played very well, but the record is what it is. T. Higgins, I think, is going to walk. He's going to get paid. And the team I like him to go to is the Los Angeles Chargers. Stay in the AFC. They're going to be close to a top 5 team in cap space, so they can afford him. DJ Shark, Josh Palmer are going to be unrestricted free agents. So you've got QJ, who we've talked about here negatively, Lad McConkey. And then, man, could you imagine plugging in T. Higgins? Ooh. I just don't think the Chargers are going to invest in yet another rookie for Justin Herbert. I think they need to get a seasoned vet. T. Higgins is 26. He's proven that he's a wide receiver 1 that just so happens to be playing on a team with Jamar Chase. And the other free agent wide receivers right now, I looked at the list. It's Diggs, torn ACL. Yeah. Keenan Allen, old. Amari Cooper. Chris Godwin coming off a major injury. DeAndre Hopkins. The list is really not too appealing. Now, maybe they will add one of those guys, but I think they're going to go out and get their guy, and I think T. Higgins is it. So that's my second one. The last one is definitely spicy, and I don't even know if I believe it, but I wanted to go a little crazy here. Brock Purdy will not start week 1 for the San Francisco 49ers. Oh. He has 1 year left on his deal. He's cost essentially nothing, $3.7 million for 4 years. I think there's interest elsewhere from other teams that would love to pay Brock Purdy. I don't think the 49ers want to pay him. Too many injuries. I don't think the 49ers have been playing poorly. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Brock Purdy is the issue, but if a team comes calling, I think they might listen. And, I'm not necessarily even sure that I know Kyle Shanahan talked up Brock Purdy when he was in his first training camp. We've heard that story. But if you remember years ago, 2017-ish, Kyle Shanahan just took over as the head coach. He was the offensive coordinator in Washington years prior. He had a connection with Kirk Cousins. And I do wonder, and this is kind of a two-parter, I do wonder if maybe a guy like Kirk Cousins or another veteran around the league would be a plug and play here for San Francisco, the same way Brady was in Tampa Bay, the same way Stafford was in Los Angeles, took those two teams to the promised land. I just wonder, obviously Purdy has some years under his belt now, but I just wonder if they want a more established veteran under center there in San Francisco. And, if you pluck a guy like Cousins away from Atlanta, maybe they want to get out of that contract because they like what they see in Michael Penix. That could be interesting. And then, you have a 3-way trade here. You get Cousins to San Fran. Maybe a team takes Purdy off their hands, and then Atlanta makes out with Michael Penix on a rookie deal. That's a winning formula.
That's interesting because I have always said that I thought Michael Penix was the best quarterback in this draft. Singly the best quarterback. I do think Atlanta wants to eventually get to him. I think they roll with Cousins. The Purdy one is interesting. So if I had to pick one of these, I like the overhaul in Dallas for selfish reasons. I think T. Higgins in for the Chargers is a huge smash. I really want him to go to New England because I have a lot of Drake May shares.
Yeah, sure.
Which would be just huge for Drake May.
Same thing, though. Go get a veteran for your rookie quarterback. Yeah. But I think the Chargers have proven they're in a position to win, and they're probably missing that veteran wideout.
Yes, I think I think that would set the Chargers easily on pace to possibly win the division against the Chiefs or be even more competitive. Be a wild card team for sure. I just wonder what New England does. And I think they can make a pitch. I just don't know if New England, with a new coach, will have the gumption to go get a T. Higgins. Yeah. I don't think New England is a T. Higgins away from winning next year. They're still going to be third in that division behind Miami and Buffalo. So T. Higgins there makes a lot of sense to the Chargers. I think the Cowboys have to overhaul. And Jerry Jones came out and said yesterday, like he's talking about extending Mike McCarthy. Like, what are we talking about there? Like,
You got it. You
you got to do something different.
get him off camera, get him off the radio. I mean, he can still be involved, but he can't be the front man for this team anymore. He's a liability. He's an absolute liability.
And I think the Micah Parsons call is great. And I think it's a really great bold prediction I can see coming true because you're right. They could get a second and 2 seconds or a first and a second. Like,
because the team that gets him is going to have to pay him. I mean, he's already on the 5th-year option. So whatever team takes him is going to obviously assume that, but then they have to pay him. So you're right. You're not going to get first-round picks for Micah Parsons.
Yeah, but I think you get enough. And I think now Micah Parsons is a premier player, but replacing what he does on your defense is easier than replacing a quarterback, a wide receiver, right? Like it's just easier to replace an edge guy or a linebacker coverage, that kind of role. You can platoon that through than you can a quarterback. I think Dak is still there. I don't think they get out of that contract. Obviously, CD's going to be there. I think they do need to go get a running back. So do they get a first-round running back and then trade Micah Parsons to get a second-round pick, and maybe they pick up a second-round wide receiver?
There's a lot of good running backs in this class. So
yeah,
I think we're going to be talking about whoever Dallas picks, but I don't think it's going to be Genty.
No, I don't think it is. I think Dallas would be smart to take the top. They're going to be in a top 10 pick probably, top 15 easily.
This win this past week kind of hurt them.
Yeah, but if they're in that 10 to 15 range, like they can get one of the top 3 or 4 linemen in the first round, and then second round, especially if you have 2 second-round picks. If you trade Micah Parsons, you get a running back and maybe a wide receiver in the second rounds. I think you can, someone across from CeeDee Lamb, because I don't think Tolbert or, Brandon Cooks, when he comes back, is really going to be it. Maybe you get someone in free agency. I don't know. Maybe they can resurrect a career like Darnell Mooney had in Atlanta. Maybe they get something like that. But I think you could see an overhaul. I wonder what they do with Trey Lance at this point. Like, you're not playing him.
It feels like a wasted 4th-round pick, and
it does feel like a wasted 4th round. And I don't know if it was just like, oh, we like this guy, so we're going to hold him so no one else can get him. But at some point, that just doesn't do anything for your team. Like, and you can't trade Trey Lance for a 4th-round pick right now.
No.
You're lucky if you could trade Trey Lance and swap 6th-round picks with someone, right? Like that's what you're That's what you're getting. So why are they not putting him out there to see what they have? Obviously, Cooper Rush is not it. Like, see what you got of them, and maybe they do in a couple weeks. I agree that Jerry Jones needs to take a step back. They need to bring in an actual general manager, probably a better coach. If they move from Dak, like, is it a total where they get Dion and Shador? Is that something that could happen if they want to get rid of Dak?
That whole thing makes me a little frustrated because it's chicken and the egg here, right? I mean, you have to hire your head coach prior to the draft, significantly before the draft, February. If you hire Deion Sanders, and Dallas has pick 13, Shador's not going to be there at 13. So now you have Dallas who has Deion. Teams know that Deion probably wants to go get his son.
Yes.
You can hold them for a rant. I mean, you can hold the pick for Shador for a ransom.
Deion's going to try to orchestrate where, Shador and Travis Hunter go. I said for the longest time that I think there's a scenario where I always said the Jets, but it could also be the Giants. They hire Deion and draft Shador because they're going to be in contention for
I think the Giants like Shador a lot. Yeah,
I do.
And I do think the Giants will be without Dayball. I think he's lost the locker room at this point.
Yeah. But I mean, hire Dayball in Dallas. I think that's a good fit for you too. Like, you get to work with Dak and Dak and CD. I think Dayball could work really well with them. But I think Shador and Deion end up in New York, whether that's New York Giants or New York Jets, one of the two. I think that's where that's headed. I know there's a lot of talk about the Raiders, possibly. Deion has said he's not leaving Colorado, but I think he'll follow Shador because I think he knows it's the next step. Because he could go coach for 3 years in the pros and then get a job at any college he wants.
Yeah,
and be he can go get a job at Oklahoma and just be there forever, or wherever he wants to go.
That's tough for all the kids committing to Colorado right now, though.
Yeah, that is.
Knowing that that's a possibility. That's
what you get for the that's the college system now. So I like your bowl picks. I like the Dallas overhaul. I think T. Higgins, the Charger, makes a ton of sense. Would make the Chargers a powerhouse. Would really increase Justin Herbert's draft capital and his cost in fantasy. Brock Purdy not starting for the 49ers is really, really interesting I got to think about that more because, there's a lot
Again,
of
I,
talk
I
of,
don't know if I necessarily believe it, but I just wanted to, put a little spice.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's spicy. And I can see it. Like, I'm not saying it's never going to happen. I think there's definitely a possibility.
I mean, we're talking $60 million a year for Brock Purdy. And I'm not
Yeah.
one of those people that says, oh, he caught lightning in a bottle. I do think Brock Purdy is good, but
Yeah.
ooh, man, you've also
But
let
right,
go of Jimmy G and Trey Lance to invest in this kid. So
yeah. And is Brock Purdy just as good on another team? Probably not. Like, at the end of the day, most quarterbacks are system quarterbacks, and that system is really good for whatever quarterback plays there.
yeah,
Is Trey Lance going to go somewhere or is Brock Purdy going to go somewhere and be just as good? Probably not. But yeah, I mean, are the Giants going to pay him $60 million? Maybe.
I don't know.
Giants they're
I don't know.
stupid, so who knows? But him not starting for the 49ers, that means they got to either bring in a veteran, which there aren't a ton available, or they bring in a rookie.
Oh, the free
And
agent quarterback list is very bad.
yeah,
Brock Purdy not being there would mean a trade. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what is Kyle Shanahan. I don't think he's on the hot seat, but if he feels like he needs to do something and quick, I don't think Debo Samuel is going to be there. But you have Christian McCaffrey, you have Brandon Ayuk coming back from injury. George Kittle's getting older.
Yep.
The defense is getting older. I mean,
but Juwan Jennings has still been, still there, and he's been good, and Ricky Pearsall should be better. Yeah, I mean, I think what's the luxury of San Fran is they've had the ability to kind of take their time, and Shanahan and Lynch have gotten that from the owners. So I'm not sure they need to go out and make a drastic move, and Brock Purdy being elsewhere would be real interesting. That would shake up a lot because I do think that changes a lot of the fantasy value for those players. Because if you're talking Kirk Cousins, that makes things a little more interesting. If you're talking Dak Prescott, I mean, if you're talking rookie, that could change a lot of things there. So that is definitely an interesting. But I liked all three of your bold picks, but I think the one I prefer when you hit me with your best shot was the Dallas overhaul. I think it's needed. I think it's most likely. And I hate the Cowboys, but I think it's what's needed for them to be competitive. I think they need to do something drastic, and it's not just a new coach. It's a new coach and kind of change the identity of the team, right? I think Mark Parsons is a great call out of trading him and getting some assets, some draft assets, or maybe a young player that you can get. I think that's huge. So,
I mean, last thing I'll say on that, I don't think CD Lamb's the kind of guy that would say, thanks for paying me, but I'd like to play elsewhere and sit out. But I mean, I guess you can't rule it out. Who knows?
Yeah, but if they bring in an exciting quarterback, maybe CD gets excited about that, right? If they could bring in one of these rookies.
A lot of money for three guys right now, and
it's a lot of money for three guys. But I think you can entice CD if you get rid of Dak to go, hey, we're going to bring in this guy and you can sell CD on that. I think CD is one of those guys that can understands and catches on the vision really well. So I think you could sell him on a new overhaul. So a new coach, new scheme, all that kind of stuff. I think we get CD excited. I don't see him being like, nope, sorry, I'm out.
Yeah.
So. Well, Colin, thanks so much for coming on. This has been a blast. Before we get out of here, why don't you everybody watching one last time where they can find you and what you got going on this year?
Yeah. Obviously, we've only got a couple more weeks left. I'm staying competitive in all my leagues as well. But as far as helping you win, fantraxhq.com. I do waiver wire, risers, fallers, and bold predictions every week to help you win. I'm on Reddit, I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Blue Sky. So find me there. I'm very responsive on all of those. So if you have any questions or just want to talk football, I will get back to you pretty much instantly because I got all my notifications on. And Dustin, thank you so much for having me tonight. This was great. I haven't been on the mic in a couple months, so this is good to get back into things.
Always, I love reaching out to people, especially, my fellow contributors of Fantrax and good, intelligent football minds who can talk about things and go beyond the normal just sit starts and waivers. I think this is a great conversation of how you break down matchups. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you guys for watching. Hit that like and subscribe. Drop a comment. Hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for tuning in to Bridge the Gap.